On this episode of ijdm, we take a look at watches.
Another visitor. Stay a while. Stay forever.
Okay, let's get started, shall we? This is the Calculator watch, basically featured by Marty McFly on Back to the Future, the first movie. Maybe I've seen it in the second and third, not really sure, but cue clip? No? Oh, Dove says no clip. Okay, so what does this watch do? Well, not a lot by today's standards of Apple watches and smartwatches and stuff like that we have nowadays. You have your day, today's Friday, you have your time, which is a military time, so it'd be about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and complete with seconds, yippee. Then you would have your calculator, and I mean, back in the day, it was just kind of cool because before this era of watches, you actually had LED watches, or excuse me, LED watches that were like individual numbers of things, and they were complicated and they used a lot of battery. This was the kind of the first of the LCD style watches that came out in that era between probably 80 and 85. Maybe give or take a year or somewhere in there. But anyhow, you had your calculator, and back then, I mean, you do what 12-year-old kids did when you had a calculator watch. You tried to see what you could spell out on the screen because, you know, if you didn't have a computer or couldn't afford one, I mean, this stuff was just, oh, it was hilarious. I mean, you're kids, you did funny, weird things sometimes, but that's what we do. And then we had an alarm on here. You could set an alarm, just one, that's it. Wake up every day, 7 o'clock. Yep. Okay. And then your dual time, if say you lived in two different time zones like Tampa Bay and LA, then there's a 3-hour difference. Well, that's tough arithmetic for me, so I want to just take a quick glance and see what the time is here or there. Then we had your handy dandy stopwatch, which you just basically hit start and stop and tell you no timer, just a stopwatch. That's it. And then back to your time. That was the calculator watch. I mean, if you're a kid back in the 80s growing up, these were a cool thing, although they could be considered dorky or geeky back then, but I always thought they were cool. I mean, I had one and I loved the thing, you know, and maybe later years in life I switched to other stuff like the Iron Man series and stuff like that. But I'm basically showing watches because LGR Clint over there at his channel did something on an IR watch from the 90s. So I thought it'd be cool to look at some 80s tech in watches on this episode. Moving right along, something a little more interesting is and I promised in the tagline of the video, is basically a computer watch. Computer watch, yes and no. It did computery things, but nothing overly complex. But it was neat for the day. This is the DBC-10, also known as the DBC-610, which came out in 1985. And these are part of the Databank series, as I said. And basically on the first screen, what you got was your day, date, and time. And then next screen, you had your telephone numbers. So right now we have 888888888. Yeah, I had another number in there in a previous cut that I had to take out. I just kind of changed it to whatever. What's cool about this is it actually, if I put in multiple numbers, it would be like if I switch this to just and then hit the thing. And I'm not sure how well you can see on the screen there, but it basically alphabetizes them for you. So it does a sort thing. So that's a computer kind of thing that's neat, that at least they're in order. And if you have your glasses on, I mean, back then you didn't have phones, like you had mobile phones, but they're incredibly expensive. And unless you worked for a company that you're required to have one and the company gave it to you, these like, you still had to remember your phone number. So you either carry around a little like address book in your pocket, or you had a Rolodex in your office. But it was handy to have it here on your wrist, and you could store like 50 to 100 maybe, you know, telephone numbers in here. I guess it may be only 50 because this is the 85 model. It wasn't waterproof as far as I know. I know later models I think were, and featured other stuff like a light and indigo light and all that. But in the 80s, this is what you got. And moving on, we have to scroll back through. We have a scheduler. So you could actually schedule on this thing. You could actually schedule different times of day and different appointments and put them in there for whatever day it was, the time you had to go to it. I don't think you could put in alternate information on the schedule, but let's see. No, okay. Yeah, see, I'm just seeing where you'd put in your date. and then the time, and then, oh yeah, you could put in a little note like lunch or whatever. We're going to M at that time or whatever, and then it would get it scheduled for whatever time and date that it was required for you to be there. Of course, you'd probably set it a few minutes early. Then we will scroll through again. We have, and there was something that went in the scheduler. Your calculator. That's what it's called. Your basic arithmetic, adding, subtracting, just like the calculator watch did, division, multiplication, and simple things like that. Then we won't cover that because we already covered it in the other watch. So it's your dual time, which I believe you could put in a couple different time zones in this watch, which made it a little more advanced than the other one. And then we have your alarm set, where you set your alarm and what time you wake up, 7 o'clock, just like the other ones. This one did have a countdown timer, which was kind of neat, that you could actually set it for 1 hour and it would count down. And unlike some of the movies of the time, like Commando, where the watch actually goes doink, doink, doink. No, they didn't do that. It was a movie effect. It just beeps when it's done. That's all it does. And then we had a stopwatch, of course, which I covered on the other watch, but this one did add the timer to it, and then back to your normal time. Nothing incredibly interesting, but back then very cool, because this was basically like a little organizer on your wrist. In 1985 is when these came out. I mean, unbelievable for this 61 and 610 series that back then Casio was way ahead of the curve of trying to like do these things. So I started collecting these before kind of the vintage boom that happened a couple of years ago. I've had them for quite a while now. And I said, well, I got this one. This one's really neat. But what would be better? What would be better? Well, to have the silver one. And I got the silver one. This one, it's not in great condition. It's banged up a little bit, and it's got the newer, there's a guy online that sells these pads. You basically, when these pads wear out, they get a little, like this one, you can feel it. It's getting like degraded and starting to kind of come apart. So you clean it up best you can with alcohol and so forth. Don't peel the pad off, because you'll peel the contacts off. And the new pads don't have the contacts, so you basically stick it right over there, and then you'd have a new legible keypad thing. Some of them are better quality than others, but I just got the cheap one and put it on there, and it fits fine, looks fine, good enough for that watch. Well, why stop there on that watch? Why not have one in gold? And yes, all these do the same thing as the other watch, except this one is a little different, is because it has like a gold background instead of the standard silver background, which makes it really neat. This one's in really good condition. It's kind of a trade-off from a touchscreen Casio Databank I had, and decided to get this set of watches. And this one has, again, all the same stuff: the scheduler, the countdown, the timer, the stopwatch, so forth. But that'll do it for this episode of ijdm. Well, yeah, it's watches, and it's 85, so they weren't overly interesting. And, of course, the calculator watch. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.